Okay, so there's a lot of small details today as the war comes to an end after that horrible massacre that we saw Ashwatthama perform. So we, so the next morning after Ashwatthama has done this horrendous thing, there's literally only one chariot driver who managed to stay alive from that massacre. And he runs to Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira wakes up every morning and he does his puja. And so he had bathed and he was in the middle of that when this chariot driver of Drishtadyumna's chariot driver actually comes running in, wailing. And highly emotional, but is able to then communicate what's happened. Yudhishthira immediately breaks down. Yudhishthira screams out in pain, which attracts the attention of the other four brothers. They all come. I mean, it's really like they want to console each other, but they all so heartbroken because remember, each one of them have lost a child in this. But it's just that everyone, like it was something like 2,000 people just killed in their sleep, which was just everyone that was remaining. And so their first concern is Draupadi. And so they bring Draupadi. Nakula actually goes back and brings Draupadi. And naturally, Draupadi is, well, to saying grieve is an understatement, right? But she goes to the tent where her sons were sleeping. She sees, which would have been in itself, like this is the kind of thing nightmares are made out. And she sits down and she says, I'm not going to move till you bring me Ashwatthama. So Ashwatthama had this jewel that was embedded in his forehead, which is what gave him all his power. And all this is so interesting because today when you see the Marvel movies, there's that one character that had a jewel embedded and that was his power, right? Like it's literally Ashwatthama's character. Although I think in the Marvel movie, that guy was nicer than Ashwatthama. But like wherever they get ideas from, it's so interesting that so many of those ideas that you see in modern sci-fi movies or modern just the concepts, like even Doctor Strange with his third eye and even parallel universes and so much of it comes from small little snippets in the Mahabharata. And somebody had told me this once. Somebody had told me that, Hollywood writers read through our Puranas very often because the stories are just so unique and unusual. And that's why that statement has come, that anything that can be said has already been said in the Mahabharata. There's that proverb that you just can't get anything new because everything that's ever existed or can ever exist has already existed in the Mahabharata. Today, when you see all this attention with gender roles and gender identities and non-binary, it was there, huh? It's there. Brahaspati has a son who is non-binary. That's a curse. He was cursed and he doesn't identify with any of the genders. They just everything, like jewel in the head to non-binary to missiles that create rain and fire and snakes and all of it's here in the Mahabharata. So she says until she gets that, she will not move. And so she literally sits down and says she's not moving. And of course, everyone tries to console her. And even Yudhishthira at this point, he doesn't know what to say. He's like lost. And Draupadi turns to Bhim. Bhim seems to be the one she always turns to because he'll do her bidding. And so Bhim goes up to look for Ashwatthama. By this time, Krishna has been updated and he walks in. And if Krishna already knew it was going to happen, he doesn't let on. Not at this point, anyway. When Ashwatthama is finally caught, he does let on. So immediately he walks in and he's like, you sent beam? Why? Don't you know that Ashwatthama knows how to use the Brahmastra, and nobody can defeat the Brahmastra? The only person here who knows how to use the Brahmastra is Arjuna. How can you send beam? So, basically you've sent beam to his death if you've sent him there alone. And so it's like immediately Krishna looks at Arjuna and says, now, go now. And post-war, during the war, you see that Krishna really protected, well, actually he's protected all of them. He's really protected Yudhishthira extensively also. And Sahadeva and Nakula, you don't really see situations where they're in danger, but you just keep seeing Arjuna, Krishna, Arjuna, Krishna. But here, post-war, you see how much Krishna saves Bhim. So this is the first thing. Bhim goes. This Ashwatthama has gone and he's hidden in an ashram near the Gangas where rishis are meditating. And so this is another interesting thing again that, and I pointed it out, that Duryodhana was scared of dying. Shakuni was scared of dying. Now you'll find Ashwatthama suddenly petrified of what the Pandavas are going to do to him. And so this is an interesting thing about our mind, right? So like, look, just literally 2 hours ago, he's this raged, obsessed, driven, has to do this horrendous thing. And then 2 hours later, there's zero strength because now he doesn't have the guts to face the consequences. And I always remember this when I heard it in one of Guruji's talks when he talked about the Mahabharata. He says, we have the guts to do the sin, but we don't have the guts to face the punishment. And so Kshatriya, actually all of us, only if you have the guts to face the punishment should you do the action. Like, this is a rule. When you're deciding, are you going to do this? First thing, can you face the consequence? And even good consequences, right? Like sometimes people will want fame and then they rush towards fame. Fame, fandom, whatever. With, like, yeah. And then when you get there, it's overwhelming to have to receive that kind of attention. Can be incredible. And then of course they're not seeing you like, well, people always have a very romantic notion, right, of actors, singers. So they're not even loving you. And so it's like they love you, but not you. And so it's a very interesting place to be in as that person who is holding that fame. So are you willing to face, do you have the guts? Do you have that strength to deal with the consequences? Then fine, do the action. But more often than not, what we find is, and this is asuric nature. In the Gita, there's this whole chapter on Devic nature and Asuric nature. Asuric nature is this cowardness to face what I have myself done. I own that I did it, right? I know I did it, but now I don't have the strength or the courage to face the consequences of what I did. But if I did it, then where else is it going to go? Where else can the consequences go? They'll come to me only. So, and this is that, this is like really, people throw around the law of karma so casually that Taylor Swift calls karma her boyfriend. Like, stop it. Like, it's not such a casual word. Like, we use it way too casually. Like, this is what karma means. Karma means that consequence, when it comes, you're going to have to face it. And so, Ashwatthama did the action with such gung-ho. Now, and you'll look through the whole Mahabharata, when Duryodhana played the game of dice, with such arrogance, he played the game of dice when he had to face the consequences. When Dushashan pulled Draupadi's hair with such pride and self, what's the word? It wasn't self-esteem. It's just ridiculous. Like, yeah, arrogance, but even worse than arrogance, right? Like this belittling, condescending way of looking at everyone else, like this haughty, or I'm not sure what the right word would be. Like arrogant, yeah, you already think very highly of yourself, but when you're ridiculing other people, like, and then when he had to die, and or when he even had to face, who did he have to face? Being in battle. So many times they ran away. Dushashan ran away from the battle. Duryodhana ran away from the battle. Like, like in one moment when you're doing something, you can be so full of yourself. Like the ego can be so big, can be so opinionated, can be so confident or self-involved. But the consequence will come. And at that time, the person's shaking. Whereas when you see everyone who had to face other consequences. So Yudhishthira, Arjuna had to face Abhimanyu dying. Now, yes, they were sad, but they held it together. They kept going. They did what needed to do. They didn't unnecessarily insult. They didn't unnecessarily disrespect. Right? Even when they faced each of those people, Bhim didn't disrespect until Krishna's instruction came. When Arjuna had to fight, he didn't disrespect Karna until Krishna's instruction came. When Yudhishthira had to fight, he didn't disrespect. I mean, Yudhishthira, the main fight was Shaila, but still, he didn't disrespect. Whereas here you see when they acted, so asuric quality is that you're very big when doing the action and very small when getting the consequence. This is asuric nature, right? Like when we're getting the consequence, be bold. Like Shaila fought. This was his consequence. He knew he was going to die. He stood there, he took it. Bhishma Pitama. This was his consequence. He got thousands of arrows thrown into his body. Huh? Like how painful is that? He knew this was his consequence. He smiled. He smiled when getting his consequence. And we'll see now, Gandharvi curses Krishna. Krishna smiles. So, sattvic mindsets, Devic mindsets, when consequences come, we own it because it's a blessing. To receive this consequence cleanses me of the action I did. Asuric mindset, when the consequence comes and I weaken and I become small and I try and run away and I complain and I whinge, and I'm adding to the impurity of the mind. Firstly, that mind that did that action causes so much impurity. Like cannot fathom Ashwatthama's karma. And then the way he reacts when the consequence comes adds more dirt, right? Whereas if the action was an impure action, then when I take the consequence gracefully, I'm purified of that impure action. And it's very much in Asian culture. I mean, actually, I'm sure it's there in the West too. I haven't noticed it, and you apologize, you bow your head, you accept. When the person, when you've wronged somebody and they're saying something back to you. In fact, in some traditions, like in Japan, they even say, please punish me. I have made a mistake and I am deserving of punishment. I haven't heard that so much in India, but I've heard it or read it in some of the Japanese Netflix series. Good things you pick up sometimes, right? But it's interesting that it's in the culture to be able to accept consequence. Okay, so Ashwatthama is hiding and he's petrified. He's literally shaking like a leaf. And when he sees Bhim coming in, he is so scared. So he's trembling. He's at a loss for what to do. And all three of them are there. But he immediately whips out the blade of grass. So Brahmastra is a weapon that charges any object to become the weapon. And usually it's a blade of grass that gets used, or a blade of grass will do. So even when Ramchandraji uses the Brahmastra, he plucks up a blade of grass and chants the mantra. Even when Sitaji puts that blade of grass in front of Ravana, it wasn't Brahmastra, but it had the power off because Ravana couldn't step past. So he does the same thing. Ashwatthama picks up a blade of grass and he chants the mantra to invoke the Brahmastra, and everything starts shining with fire. So the Brahmastra, I think the best way to explain what the Brahmastra is an atomic bomb. The description of the Brahmastra is pretty much atomic bomb, because it starts with this ball of light and the light keeps getting bigger. And it's forbidden to use it. So any warrior who is taught the Brahmastra is forbidden to use it. And so Dronacharya knew it, and he only ever used it on Arjuna, who knew how to counter it. But he taught it to his son, Ashwatthama, who's using it against Bhim, who doesn't know how to counter it. So here you see, one, he can't take the consequences of the actions he's already done, and then he does worse. Right? Like this is something you've been forbidden to do. You cannot use the Brahmastra. Why can't you use the Brahmastra? It destroys the whole planet. Now that's a pretty big thing. So why do they even have it? Because some people have it, and other people need to know how to counter it. For exactly cases like this, where Ashwatthama has used it incorrectly. So Arjuna immediately runs to Krishna and says, what's happening? Because now imagine, he knows how to use the Brahmastra, and he can't recognize it because it's never been used. Because the minute you use it, the whole planet will be destroyed. So atomic bomb, right? But like on a bigger scale. So Krishna says, this is the Brahmastra, and you need to release yours. And Arjuna thinks, how is this a solution? And Krishna says, because Ashwatthama doesn't know how to withdraw his. So you have to release yours and withdraw both of them. Look at the power of Arjuna's mind, that he can withdraw both of them. Now, even though Krishna says this, Krishna says he doesn't know how to withdraw it. Vedavyasa notices the Brahmastra has been launched. He comes immediately to Ashwatthama, pretty much like, doesn't do it literally, but like figuratively, hits him on the back of the head and says, what's wrong with you? What are you doing? You cannot release this Brahmastra. Don't you know it's forbidden? And says, withdraw it. Now, Vedavyasa should have also known that he doesn't know how to withdraw it. He doesn't have, one, he doesn't know how to. Two, he doesn't have the power to. Now, I've mentioned this before. These missiles were all guided by their mind. Today, computers are guiding missiles, but in those days, minds were guiding the missiles using mantras. And you needed so much strength to be able to hold it, direct it, and release it. He did not have, Ashwatthama, did not have the strength to bring it back. He didn't have this mental strength to be able to diffuse the Brahmastra, which is why he can't withdraw it. His mind is now not able to dissolve the power that has been launched. This is again that asuric tendency, right? Like so much power, and then it's too big. It's too big for you. It causes damage. When we have power, it's incredible. That's that whole Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. We have to know how to wield it. We have to know how to be able to wield that power. And the simplest example is like a driver behind the wheel. If you don't know what you're doing behind that wheel, People get hurt, lives get lost. Huh? Surgeon holding the whatever they hold, scalpel and all those other things. They hold so many things, right? If you don't know how to use it, you have to be able to wield your power. Have to have that strength and the dexterity. Dexterity means skill. Both strength first and foremost, and skill. Because every power requires a certain amount of strength and definitely requires a certain amount of skill. So here Ashwatthama doesn't know to. Vedavyasa hits him right on the back of the head and says, withdraw it. And Ashwatthama's too ashamed to say he doesn't know how to. And so what does he do? He redirects it. So how low can we fall? Ashwatthama. Not Duryodhana. Ashwatthama is how low we can fall. He thinks, I don't know how to withdraw it. I can redirect it. Where should I redirect it? Uttara, who's Abhimanyu's wife, is pregnant. They're going to kill me now. Who? The Pandavas. They hear, they're angry, they're going to kill me now. Before I die, let me ruin the entire lineage properly. I've already killed the sons. Sure, it was a mistake, but I've already done it. So now I'll kill the remaining baby in the womb, who's the only heir now to the Pandava lineage. Yeah. Yes, I can see the horror in your face. Who thinks like this? Apparently people do. This is how petty we can get. I'm not saying this is how petty Ashwatthama got. This is how petty we can get. Sometimes we'll have a fight, like siblings. Sometimes you'll see it. I'll see it in the Bhavya class also. Huh? So two siblings will fight over ice cream. And then one took the other one's ice cream. And now what's this one going to do? You took my ice cream. What does she do? Ruin the bed or and like to what extent they'll go to get vengeance. Like basically I didn't get what I want, which becomes anger, and then that anger becomes so destructive, so petty. We need to be so aware of this. We need to be so aware when we want vengeance, because it's actually such a, and you see it so much in the Mahabharata, and we think we don't want vengeance, but we do. The minute something happens in our life, somebody says something, right? In conversation, four people having lunch, one person says, da 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 da, some sly comment about my weight, about my looks, about my failed assignment, about my inability to be disciplined, my inability to whatever, wake up early, my inability to have a relationship, my inability to maintain a job. Now, what do I want? Vengeance. So quickly that wanting to, like that the minute we feel we've been attacked, that counterattack. And in the jungle, it was great because, it was a physical counterattack. In today's world, it's very convoluted, sly comments, messages on WhatsApp, post on Instagram, ignoring, pretending. We take our vengeance. And how far do we go? Sometimes we forget what the original statement was. We just stuck in that mode of how dare she. We don't even remember. And sometimes it was correct also what they said. Sure, they shouldn't say it, but it was correct. We can be petty. We can be very, very petty. And this is the height of it. Ashwatthama is the height of wanting to kill Uttara's child in the womb, who is going to be Pariksha, right? This is where Bhagavata comes full circle. Now, this is a beautiful bit. Arjuna sees that the Brahmastra has disappeared. Arjuna thinks Ashwatthama has done the right thing and withdrawn it. Now, somebody who would do that can think. And look, Arjuna has seen that Ashwatthama has done this massacre Once again, you see this with Arjuna and Yudhishthira. They can still see good. They can still see good. Arjuna actually thinks Ashwatthama has withdrawn it. Even though Krishna said he doesn't know how to, but he didn't register. It didn't register. So Uttara in the palace suddenly feels heat because the Brahmastra is like fire, right? She puts her hands together, closes her eyes, and says, Krishna, please protect me. And here too, Uttara was married to Abhimanyu. Abhimanyu adored Krishna. So she's lived in the house with Abhimanyu and Krishna. Because Abhimanyu lived with Subhadra, Subhadra lived with Krishna. Because remember, the rule was no wife except Draupadi will live in the main house. Every wife that was married went back to their house. So Subhadra stayed with Krishna. And then actually Subhadra did spend quite a bit of time in the main house, but then they were exiled. So Subhadra went back to Krishna, and Abhimanyu learned everything from Krishna. So if you remember this, so she's grown up. Like she met Arjuna when he was teaching her dancing as Brahandala, whatever his name was. And then, she loved Arjuna, but then of course she's staying now with Subhadra, Krishna, Abhimanyu in this house. And so her first thought when she feels the slightest amount of pain is Krishna. Why? Because the first thought that Abhimanyu had when he felt anything was Krishna. The first thought Subhadra thinks when she feels anything is Krishna. And so Uttara, in the short time of living in this family, already knows Krishna. Krishna is sitting in the chariot with Arjuna on the banks of Ganga in front of Ashwatthama. She prays. He hears. He can actually hear her voice because that prayer was with every bit of her being. The only thing she has left is this baby in her womb, and she feels it's going to be hurt. And so every cell in her being screamed, Krishna. Krishna heard. He literally hears her voice and hears her prayer. While still sitting in the chariot, Krishna has gone and entered Uttara's womb and shields Parikshit. So the Brahmastra is attacking, but Krishna's shielding. And it is said that when Krishna was born to Devaki, he did not enter her womb. God, who is unborn, will not come from a womb. Krishna appears. The story is very clear. In front of Devaki and Vasudeva in that jail, Krishna appears. In a flash of light, he appears. He is not born from Devaki's womb. And we know he's not born from Yashoda Maya's womb. The Lord, even when Kaushalya gave birth, the Lord does not enter a womb. He entered Uttara's womb to shield Parikshit. Now there's 3 versions of the Mahabharata. There's the Mahabharata, which we are reading now, and this is the story. There's also reference to the Mahabharata in the Bhagavatam, and there's reference to the Mahabharata in the Ramayana. And there is a version that says that he forces her to give birth there and then because the Brahmastra had already hit. And so she gives birth to a stillborn, And then Krishna holds the baby and breathes his life into it and brings it back to life. So, but in this section of the Mahabharata, he shields. He becomes a shield for the Brahmastra. And so Parikshit's not hurt. And when I tell this story to the Balvihar kid, I'll say that Parikshit was in his mother's womb, just busy doing what he does in the mother's womb. And then suddenly there was brilliant blue light all over the womb. And he was suddenly so happy and so ecstatic. And he couldn't believe that how can someone be so ecstatic? And then Krishna leaves. He's like, where'd it go? Where did it go? And his whole life, he remembers that blue light that came into his room and made him so happy. And so his whole life, he kept thinking, where did it go? He kept looking for Krishna, which is the story of the Bhagavatam, right? And that's why the Bhagavatam is taught to Parikshit, because of that intense love that Parikshit has for Krishna. It was literally for Krishna, who he has met even before he is born. And how cool is it that Krishna can be sitting in the banks of the river Ganga, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilometers away, and still become a shield for Uttara in the world. And this is one of the, it's so underrated as one of those stories. Like so often people, I myself do this, will say that Draupadi called out and Krishna appeared. Because she does, right? In the game of dice, when the Shashan is pulling at her robes, she screams out Krishna. And Krishna's there like this. Before a blink of an eye, he's there, his cloth covering her. And even in the Gajendra story, Gajendra is this elephant and he's being eaten by a crocodile, and he takes a lotus and he throws it into the air and he says Vishnu. And before even Garuda gets a chance to come, Krishna's already there. I mean, Krishna. This is one of those stories. Uttara, with all her being, says Krishna. He's there already, entered her womb and protected the baby. If we think about it, we just have to think about it. That's all we have to do. Is that? Okay, so Ashwatthama's Brahmastra got taken care of. By this point, Arjuna is holding Ashwatthama, and Krishna says, kill him. And Arjuna can't. He just can't. And he says, let me take him back to Yudhishthira and Draupadi, and let them decide their fate. He's still the son of my guru. He's still a Brahmin. Krishna says he's not a Brahmin. After what he does, we know you're not Brahmin by birth, you're Brahmin by your guna, your actions. He's not a Brahmin. You cannot call him that. And so, Bhim also finally says, let's just take him back. And so they bring him back to Draupadi and Yudhishthira in the tent, and he's kneeling down on the floor. And finally Draupadi says, his mother, Ashwatthama's mother, Dronacharya's wife, didn't ascend the pyre where Drona was burnt because she still had a son. Now you must remember, while the war is going on, all the women are there for each other. And so Draupadi would have seen her heartache when Drona died. And for my son, she lived, Ashwatthama. Draupadi finally says, I will not put another mother through the pain I am going through. Like just a little while ago, Draupadi was, I want his head. And I guess immediately when you hear something, those emotions, they do like our immediate reaction. And that's why always when something happens, we say, wait, don't make the decision then. Just wait. And then go and talk to someone who can help you calm down. and get out of that emotion so that you can make a wise decision. Because very often when something just happens and we react, it's usually uh, we all know we do foolish things. So Draupadi's, it's not even been hours, huh? This would have happened before lunchtime. So she found out maybe breakfast. So it's not a long time. But she's already saying now she no longer wants vengeance. And this is the only way to stop. I said this already so many times. This is the only way to stop. This is the only way to make the world a better place. Giving up this desire for vengeance. And if we see vengeance as justice, then we feel we have a right to it. We have to just see it for what it is. It's happened, it's over, cannot change. This is what Draupadi says. I cannot bring my sons back. By killing him, I'm making another mother go through what I'm going through. And I just don't have the heart to do that. Just don't have the heart to make a mother go through what I am going through. Now, Draupadi has lost all 5 sons, all at the same time. This is a lot, huh? Subhadra losing Abhimanyu was already a lot, but really Draupadi sitting there in this point in time to be able to forgive Ashwatthama while looking at him. This is why Draupadi is considered one of the most powerful women to have existed. Because she could sit there looking at Ashwatthama. She's in the room with the bodies of her dead sons who have been chopped. It's not a pretty sight. Like, it was a very violent death. They were barely 20 years old. They're so young. She's looking at the person who did it, and she forgives. Draupadi says, let it all just end now. Let this be over. Those are her exact words. Bhim didn't like this. Bhim gets really angry and launches towards Ashwatthama. And Draupadi stands between Bhim and Ashwatthama. She actually protects Ashwatthama from Bhim. Strong women. This is a strong woman. I said this before. Draupadi was a strong woman because she stood there in that court during the game of dice and looked everybody in the eye and said, what is dharma? You tell me what is dharma. She was able to forgive Yudhishthira for gambling her away. In a heartbeat, she forgave him and she won back the kingdom and she won back Yudhishthira. You can't get stronger than Draupadi. And it wasn't because she can shout and she can scream. It's because she would be able to keep her eye so clearly on what is dharma, what is right. And she could act in accordance with dharma. Draupadi is truly a befitting wife to Yudhishthira. She was stunning, stunning. I told you there were 5 pages of description of how beautiful she is, including that her hair smelled nice. Does not compare to how magnificent she is when she's sitting here in the pool of blood, her dead sons, looking at the man who does it, and she's protecting him so that another woman doesn't feel the pain that she is feeling. This is why Draupadi is amazing. This is why she deserves 5 husbands as amazing as the Pandavas. This is why she is called Krishna. The feminine form of Krishna's name did not go to Rukmini, did not go to Radha. It went to Draupadi. who called Krishna Sakha. Mhm. Draupadi's beauty. When we feel pain and we want to impose that same pain on somebody else, it's normal, right? But when we feel pain and we wish nobody else feels this kind of pain, then that is a true devotee. That is true sattva. That is dharma at its best. And so Bhim says he can't go unpunished. And in that moment, Arjuna gets up, uses his sword, rips out the jewel from Ashwatthama's head and pulls Ashwatthama's hair out and chops it. So apparently chopping a soldier's hair like this is equivalent to death. It's a horrendous insult. It's an act of shame on the person who has it done to them. And Arjuna said, it's done. What Draupadi asked for was the jewel on his head that has all his power. Here, hands it to Draupadi. I fulfill Draupadi's words. You say he deserved death, I fulfill that as well. But he's still our Guru's son. Now let him go. Not quite yet. Krishna looks at him and says, for what you have done, you will live 300,000 years in pain of disease and regrets. This is why it's believed that Ashwatthama is still alive, because he's been cursed. You will wander around in forest, stinking, literally stinking. Nobody will ever come near you. So you will be lonely. When you're going to do something, there's going to be a consequence. Duryodhana got to die and go up to heaven. Why? Because Duryodhana was playing his part. What Ashwatthama did is just too petty. He doesn't get to go to heaven. Worse fate than hell. Loneliness. How horrible is that? Pain of physical disease and the pain of regrets. And he has no more power because that stone has been taken out. So he can now no longer use any weapon, not even ordinary bow and arrow. He now has no longer any power. It's all gone. And then Krishna says, now endure the fruits of your action. Oh, sorry, 3,000, not 300,000. So, some say Mahabharata was at least 5,000 years ago, so then he's gone. Some say no, still around. But he left. And nobody will ever see him because when that jewel was pulled out, his face darkened and became very, very disfigured. Now with the disease, it became even more disfigured. You know, he tried to escape. This is the thing about karma. That's why I said the word gets used way too casually. His There's no escaping, there's just no escaping karma. When it comes, embrace it. But know that it's going to come and do only what you're willing to face consequences of. Okay, so this whole bit ends. Everybody starts going towards the funeral pyres. Now, there's this bit. Gandharvi and Dhritarashtra, of course, are extremely distraught. Naturally, right? They have 99 sons killed. Yuyutsu was still in them. The only one that stood up against Duryodhana, and so was spared. He didn't fight also. Is that right? I have to verify that. I think so. The night when they were sleeping in, so the night the massacre happened, Yudhishthira is already scared of the Dhritarashtra and Gandharvi, and so Krishna has gone. So the 5 Pandavas were in Duryodhana's tent. Krishna has gone to Hastinapur and tells Gandharvi and Dhritarashtra, war is over, you have to accept. The Dhritarashtra and Gandharvi are weeping, 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 weeping. And Krishna says, but you knew this was going to happen. So they say yes. And they were about to curse, but because Krishna explains to them, you knew this was going to happen. I myself came, I myself tried to convince you, I tried to stop this war. Do you remember what you said? Do you remember that? And so, okay, pacified. Now, this has all happened with the whole Ashwatthama. Now, finally, the day, so it's almost the next evening, the Pandavas have gone to Hastinapur. Yudhishthira is about to go meet the Dhritarashtra and Gandharvi. Gandharvi is ready to curse. Veda Vyasa comes. Veda Vyasa knows what's in her mind, and Veda Vyasa comes and says, do not curse Yudhishthira. You cannot curse Yudhishthira. And then Veda Vyasa does this whole explanation about how the earth, Mother Earth, became heavy. Just did this with the Balvihar. Did it in a really nice Balvihar way. So I was explaining Balvihar style. When we happy, we feel light. When we sad, we feel heavy. So when we sad and we feel heavy, Mother Earth also feels like we are heavier. It's true. I did it in Balvihar style, but I'm saying true. When we are miserable, when we are suffering, the earth feels we are heavy. The earth had become unable to hold the population because the population had become too heavy with sorrow, fear, jealousy. And so Mother Earth went up to Lord Vishnu and said, help. Vishnu said, I will cleanse the earth of all these people who are plundering the earth and causing the sadness. And I will do it through Duryodhana. Duryodhana will be born to the Dhritarashtra and Gandharvi and will cause a war that will lead to the death of everyone who has wronged Mother Earth. Veda Vyasa says to the Dhritarashtra and Gandharvi. And she says that that was Duryodhana's fate. Do not be upset that Duryodhana has died. It was what he was meant to do. He accomplished what he was meant to do. And chapter 4, we see that Krishna himself says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. Whenever dharma declines, right? This is a very well-known verse. Gets chanted very musically at the beginning of the Mahabharata series. Adbhutanam adharmasya tatatnanam srujamyaham. That I manifest. Whenever dharma is on decline, I manifest. Paritranaya sadhana vinashaya dushkritam. To protect the good and to destroy the evil. But very importantly, dharma samsthapanartaya. To re-establish dharma. Sambhavami yuge yuge. From era to era. Re-establish dharma. When the earth can no longer bear the weight of our sins, the Lord manifests to cleanse the earth of its sins. So Mother Earth can. Even when COVID happened, somebody was saying, "Look, that's what's happening." I don't know if COVID justifies that. No avatar happened. But from time to time, the earth needs to be cleansed. In today's world, it's just sheer population that's making the earth so heavy. But population's not so much the problem. It's the selfishness in our heart. That's the problem. When there's more selfishness. Now, you'll say this, he was the nicest person, she was the nicest person. Maybe. In the Mahabharata war, everyone had wronged Mother Earth in some way or the other. Some point or the other. Now, how do we wrong Mother Earth? This is so easy to do, huh? If I give you the list, we're in trouble. Waste food. We're wronging Mother Earth when we waste food. Suddenly the Mahabharata war starts making a lot of sense. When we forget to be grateful for all the resources. When we take resources only for ourselves and deny other people resources. This is how we wrong Mother Earth. I take it for me and I won't give it to you. You see this nowadays, right? Countries taking water supply, not allowing other countries to have water supply. Water is meant for everyone. Minerals also. Today, even silicon coming from the earth. So much fighting for all these things. We're wronging Mother Earth. When we take what we don't need, when we waste what we're given, we're wronging Mother Earth. Today, you see these piles and piles and piles and piles of garbage. Yeah. Time for another Mahabharata. It's happening in different ways. You're right. It is. It is happening in different ways. Duryodhana was an incarnation of Kali. Who's Kali? We talk about Kali Yuga. Kali is the character of Kali. Incarnation of selfishness. He had played his part well. That's why he went to heaven. He played his parts. Are we playing parts? Yeah, maybe. Let's not play that one. Let's not be Kali. Let's choose to be someone else. So, Vedavyasa has told Gandharvi and Dhritarashtra, hold no malice in your heart. Duryodhana was just meeting the consequences of his action. Don't forget that you yourself said victory cannot come to anyone with dharma. This was Gandhavri's verse. When Duryodhana bowed down to Gandhavri before the battle, she didn't say, God bless you, may you win. She said, victory can never be those who follow the path of the dharma. She's saying this to Duryodhana, our own son. She knew what was going to happen. Now what happens? They come. Who? Pandavas. Two, Gandhavri and Dhritarashtra. Ta-na-na-na. The mother in her, she's furious. She's using every iota of control in her not to curse. She's struggling. She's like, I want to curse. No, I shouldn't curse. Everything they said is right. The Duryodhana deserved it. But how could they? You can imagine her turmoil. Why this turmoil? Attachment. Attachment causes this turmoil. Draupadi forgave Ashwatthama. Gandhavri, knowing what the Duryodhana did was wrong, is angry with Yudhishthira, who did nothing wrong. She's angry with Yudhishthira, who did nothing wrong. So she used up a lot of her tapas. But she's still so angry. And then what does she do? She takes off her blindfold and she looks at Yudhishthira's feet. She wants to look at Yudhishthira and burn all of him. She doesn't. She looks at his feet and she sees his feet burning. She stops. She's able to control herself. She burns his feet. And then Dhritarashtra, he says, yes, y'all are right. Duryodhana deserved to die. Let me embrace you. He embraces Yudhishthira. He's able to forgive Yudhishthira. He embraces Arjuna. Yes, that's fine. Well, not Arjuna yet. Nakula Sahadev. Then when they said beam, suddenly Dhritarashtra's, oh. And Krishna holds beam. Doesn't that beam go to in front of Dhritarashtra? Remember, Dhritarashtra is blind, so he doesn't know. Yudhishthira, Krishna, I love it. He doesn't use his power often. He uses his yogic power to transfer the Duryodhana had an iron statue made of beam, who he used to use for fighting. So, like, he had his own personal gym, and in the gym there was a statue of beam who he beat daily. So Krishna uses his yogic power to bring that statue of beam from the gym to the wherever they are right now. I think it was in their bedroom, and puts the statue of beam in front of the Dhritarashtra. Now, beam was very strong. So when the Dhritarashtra embraces this iron statue, he thinks it's beam only because beam is very strong. And the Dhritarashtra is so strong. I don't know if y'all remember this. The Dhritarashtra has the strength of 100 elephants. Yeah. He was born to Veda-Vyasa and he was born blind, and then it was compensated because, and then he literally crushes this iron statue into iron filing. And then Sanjay, and then he's choking and he is bleeding and he is, Sanjaya says, why you have to be like this? Sanjaya usually says such profound lines. Like if you read the Mahabharata, Sanjay is like, quoting all the Gita verses, and when the Dhritarashtra does this, he says, why do you have to be like this? And suddenly, Krishna says, but Duryodhana narrates again, right? We've already heard. Duryodhana had done all these things and he's just meeting the consequences. Why are you holding it against Bhim? And suddenly the Dhritarashtra feels really, really bad and puts his head down in shame. Then he actually hugs Bhim and forgives Bhim. Gandhavri too actually hugs Bhim and forgives Bhim. But before Gandhavri does that, she says to Bhim, like, how could you be so ruthless? You killed him by unfair means. Bhim says, I have no regret because I followed Krishna's instruction. And so Gandharvi says, Krishna, this is all your fault. Everyone dying is your fault. And so she does curse. She doesn't curse Yudhishthira, she doesn't curse Bhima. She curses Krishna. And so when when you see how much Krishna does for the Pandavas, he rode the chariot, he took their onslaught of all their weapons, he helped them fulfill their vows, he helped them get out of really, really, really difficult situations. He took their curse. Gandhavri's curse, she wanted to curse Yudhishthira. She wanted to curse Bhima. She cursed Krishna. Krishna, just like I have watched my family destroy each other, you will watch your family destroy each other. And you will die by foul means. Krishna smiles, bows down, touches her feet, and says, Tatastu. Do you know when they say Tatastu? When they grant boons. Tatastu means, may it be so. Krishna accepts the curse with a smile on his face. And not only does he accept the curse, he says, Mother, calls her mother. He doesn't call her Gandharvi, calls her mother. Krishna did actions. This is the consequence. Look how he is accepting it. He told Yudhishthira to lie. This is the consequence. He killed Karna while Karna was unarmed, on the floor, helpless. This is the consequence. He cut off Drona's head using a lie. This is the consequence. How does Krishna accept the consequence? Tatastu. And then he says, thank you, mother. The Yadava clan, the Varshinis is the clan that they belong to, Lord Vishnu's clan, Krishna's clan, cannot ever be defeated by anyone. And as I'm winding up my avatar, I was wondering, how would I end this lineage? So there's the story about Krishna killing Narakasuma and freeing 16,000 princesses. Then Krishna became 16,000 people to marry the 16,000 princesses. And they weren't avatars, but they were made by him. This is the Yadava clan. This is the Varshinis. So when Krishna dies, they all have to die too. How will they all die? Gandharvi's curse. They will kill each other because nobody else is powerful enough to kill. So look at Krishna. When consequences come, he even sees silver lining. 1, he's smiling. 2, he did not resist, did not complain, did not say it's not fair, did not give any excuse of why he should not have to face that consequence. Even though he should not have to face it. 3, accepts gracefully. We've seen how not to deal with the consequences of actions. And then, of course, the best example is always, 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 always Krishna. The Pandavas are crying. Krishna is smiling. So they met Gandharvi and the Dashtra first. Then they go to meet Kunti. Kunti cries a lot because she realizes all her grandchildren are dead. It's also the first time Kunti is seeing her children since they left for the forest after the game of dance. So Kunti is seeing them after so long. And then they have a beautiful reunion. Kunti showers much love and affection on them, consoles Draupadi extensively, praises Draupadi extensively. And then they go together to perform the last rites of all those remaining soldiers. So the last rites were performed daily. At the end of every day of battle, whoever was killed was buried, not buried, burnt, and the prayers were done. And then now this has just happened. So all these people and whoever was maybe overlooked. Like sometimes in the day too much happened and something. And this is at this point is when Kunti will say, did I already say Karna's last rites? I did already say that, right? Kunti will tell Yudhishthira to do Karna's last rites. Yudhishthira will say why. Kunti finally reveals. So all of this is happening. This is day 19. The war is truly over. So now what happens? We shall see next week. Truly a cliffhanger, because now y'all don't know what's going to happen. Everyone's already dead. What could possibly happen now? Ta-na-na-na. Any questions?
Story question. Why did Arjuna have to shoot his own Brahmastra? Couldn't he just counter Ashwatthama's?
I don't know. Her question is, why did Arjuna have to shoot his own Brahmastra? Couldn't he just counter Ashwatthama's? Apparently not, because that seems to be the instruction given. I don't really know how the Brahmastras work, except that it was released through mental power. From what I have understood is they would have had to collide, be attached, and only then Arjuna would have control over it. Arjuna can't control somebody else's because his mind didn't release it. From my limited understanding, which may not be accurate. It would have to be attached to something of his to be able to control it.
Did Arjuna take it back?
Arjuna didn't end up taking it back. Krishna ended up absorbing it when it tried to hurt Parikshit in the womb. And in all versions of the Mahabharata, it's Krishna that absorbs Ashwatthama's Brahmastra. Nobody else would have had the power to. I mean, Arjuna could have. In terms of strategy of war, he could have. But because it wasn't being withdrawn, because it was actually launched, Arjuna could have withdrawn it. But because it was launched and it attacked, only Krishna could bear the brunt of it, the collision of it, the explosion of it, whatever. But I don't know enough. Some of it's really fascinating. Every time I read the Mahabharata, I think, oh, I'm going to have to read it again to go into these details. Because this time around, I actually have gone into a way more detail than I have previously. But yeah, this time around, I've noticed so many of the arrows. Yeah, arrows that cause darkness, arrow that causes rain, arrows that cause snakes to go everywhere, and arrows that cause fire. Of course, that one we know. Arrow that causes you to sleep. Everyone fell asleep on the battlefield. Like, yeah. No, I didn't answer. I don't have enough expertise to answer you on Brahmastras. There is more written about it. I didn't read too much. Otherwise, I don't think I can take class weekly. I'd have to read for 3 weeks and then take a class. There's just so much there. There's so much there. So much description and so much dialogue, huh? There's lots of times when I'm skimming. And half the dialogue I read, but I'm not telling you because otherwise it doesn't fit into the hours class. Brilliant dialogue. So much philosophy in the dialogue. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkhabhag bhavet, asatoma sakamaya, tamasoma jyotirgamaya, mrityurma amritangamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Hari Om.